we are crazy enough to spend a lot of money to build robots, and we have a great time doing it. So I've got a lot of things to talk about, and I'm going to get going. And today, what I'm really going to be talking about is R2 in the movies. I got some great behind-the-scenes shots and some things I'll guarantee you didn't know or haven't seen before. All right, so the R2 Builders Club. People ask us about this all the time. What's the R2 Builders Club? We have a website at astromech.net. It's an international club. We have members all over the world, probably about 4,000 right now. And we build droids. We trade information, plans, all kinds of stuff. So if you want to see more, just type Astromech into your search engine. We represent a local chapter, the Northwest R2 Builders Club. And today we've got about 30 droids here. Many of you probably have seen them across the street over underneath the space shuttle. If not, go over there right after this because there's a bunch of them there, plus a whole lot of parts and pieces of taken apart droids so you can see how they work. Okay, that's who we are. This is from a convention we did a couple years ago. And I want to talk about today R2. But I've got some helpers here. The first helper I've got is R2, R9. He's back here someplace. He's a little slow. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. R2, R9, hello. I have R2A2 here. I have R4M9. This is going to be a test later. I have R3D3. R3, are you there? Oh yeah, there's R3. He's a little shy because his dome's clear. Just like R3B2 is going to come out here in a second. Yeah, here comes R3B2. Yep. He's nervous, okay. R4G9 is here. Okay, come out in front, R4G9. Yeah, you're fine. Come all the way out. And then, finally, I have one other droid. Who do you think it is? R2D2. R2D2, are you here? Let's make some room. Oh yeah, here he comes. He thinks he's the big star. I'll tell you what. I don't know. Are you the big star, R2? R2, are you the big star? I didn't think you were shy. Come on here in front for a minute. Okay, almost all of these droids were in the movies, someplace. Yeah, I know. You were in every single movie, R2. Every single one. But like, R2, R9 down here, the red guy, tell me about your movie experience. R2, R9 was blasted off Queen Amidala's starship in the very first opening sequence. What? He says that R2 pushed him into the laser blast. Not too sure about that. R2A2. Whoa, orange guy over here. Huh? Well, I'll be darned. These droids. R2A2. What are you? Empire Strikes Back. 3 seconds of screen time? You think you saw yourself in The Force Awakens? I'm not too sure about that. Everybody go watch for him in The Force Awakens. R3B2. Yeah? Huh? R3B2 was not in any movie. What? R3D2 says he was too pretty to be in any of the movies. Didn't want him because he'd upstage R2D2. Okay, so let's talk about Star Wars. How many people here have a piece of Star Wars clothing on today? Yeah, a lot. A lot, okay? R2D2, we are convinced R2D2, it's all about R2D2. He is a marketing machine. You can buy R2D2 high heels, I don't know, R2D2 backpacks, you can buy cups, cereal bowls, pop. There is nothing that you can buy that they don't make with R2D2 on it. I'm convinced of that. Yeah. What? You don't get any royalties? Is that what you said? Yeah, okay. Even the post office has gotten an R2D2. But the biggie, and this is kind of funny, people, we talk to kids all the time, all around, you know, do you like R2-D2? Oh yeah, I love R2-D2. He's a big movie star, yeah, I know. Have you ever seen the movie he's in? And the kids will go, no. The parents will be like, what? You've never seen Star Wars? But they know R2-D2 from Legos, from Clone Wars, from all that stuff. So he is such a machine. He is the most recognized movie star on the planet. Okay, more people know who he is than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Let's talk about where R2-D2 came from. I'm going to talk about this hieroglyph a little later, but what I really want to talk about is how he came to be. So George Lucas was a little producer. Yes, I know George Lucas. I know he gave you your first shot at the job, I know. Like these movies from Silent Running called Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And they were three little robots. The movie isn't that good, but the robots are really pretty cool. So he went to a Boeing graphic designer called Ralph McQuarrie, who lived up here, and he said, look, I want robots for my movie that are stubby and short, and they don't look like people, and I want something like this, but make it round. And that's pretty much what George McQuarrie did. So he sketched up a couple sketches. This is his very first sketch of R2. And said, how about something like this? And George says, that's great. I want one robot that's like a real robot, and then I want one like comic relief robot. And they styled C-3PO after Metropolis, and he was the comic relief, I think. Kind of worked out both ways. So here we have the two concepts, and George Lucas says, yeah, that's really cool, I like those guys. So this was the very first pre-production sketch he did. Originally, R2 was going to walk like he was on crutches. The center was going to come out, it was going to pick up, the legs were going to come, and he was going to walk like he was on crutches. But that's what he's doing here. But they could never build that, so they quickly switched over to him running on treads. Interesting thing, that mountain in the background is the Oregon coastline. And that was a sketch that Ralph had done of the Oregon coast, and he said, I really like that background, so he just put some sand in front of it and put the robots in. That was kind of cool. So he's actually invented in the Northwest. Who knew? So he kept working on it, and he said, okay, I got a little bit better sketch here, George. And George says, yeah, that's pretty good, I like that. So let's go with that kind of for our design, and you can see he's a little bit different there. These are some sketches that were done by a guy named John Barry, and you can see over here what they're doing in this sketch is trying to figure out how to get R2 on a landscape. Because you remember they had to haul him into town. So they kind of were working on some of those details. Finally, they came up with this pre-production sketch of what's called the Fab Five. And we all know who these people are, of course. It was Chewbacca, Han Solo, C-3PO, R2-D2, and this girl right here is Luke. And George Lucas kept saying, you know, girl, boy, he kept going back and forth in the script, and he couldn't figure out what it should be, girl or boy or whatever. And finally he said, you know what, I'm going to do twins. So that was how Luke and Leia came up. So, trivia. So now it's time to make a movie. And this is back in the old days. I see a lot of you out here remember the old days, like me. Some of you have no idea. You think you do everything on a computer. But back in the old days, we actually built real live things like models and robots because there was no computer-generated animation. They had to be real. So they drew up some plans, and that's one of the R2 plans that's popular, runs around, and actually kind of where the club got its start using these plans from Lucasfilm of R2-D2. And then they said, okay, and then R4, his head, they needed some different heads, I'll talk about that later. So there's George Lucas with the very first prototype they just threw together out of a piece of wood, and it was really to test out if they could fit a person inside of it, and if they could make a robot out of it. And they said, yeah, this will work, so they sent it off to Ralph McQuarrie, who did some drawings, and said, okay, let's build it. So there's R2-D2. That's the very first R2-D2. He's built in England. He's all metal. I'll show you a picture later with one of our club droids, but he looks just like the droids we have here today. So they're like, okay, this works. They were running him around, doing some test shots before they painted him. He was a robot, he ran, he worked okay. Not great, but okay. So, as you can see, people ask me, didn't R2 have a guy in it? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit, but almost all the scenes in the movie, R2 was a real robot. And by the third movie, Return of the Jedi, every scene was a real robot. So yes, he's a real robot. I think he might have had tubes in him. It was not all long ago, but he worked. And he was built in England, like I said, by a guy named John. What's his name? We're going to show you a picture of him in a little while. John Sears. Okay. That's George Lucas with his buddy Francis Ford Coppola. When they got R2 all painted up, they did a beauty shot because they know he was the top guy in the movie. They didn't have any money when they made this movie. They had very little money. George Lucas nobody knew who he was, but he had made a movie called American Graffiti that was pretty popular and made some money and made him a name. So he said, now I want to do my space movie that I've always wanted to do. But he shopped it around and he got somebody to buy it. And they said, okay, you can make your new movie for about $8 million, which was not very much money back then. So they said, okay, well, we can build one robot and make a whole bunch of different domes for him and make him be 4, 5, 6 different robots. And also, they were testing colors because some of the colors didn't show up good against a blue screen. So this is basically a bunch of prototype domes. This is the very first test shot, and you can see Kenny Baker in here. We're gonna look at him a little bit later. This guy is the guy that really brought R2-D2 to life. This is Ben Bird. He's a sound engineer. Now remember, when Star Wars came out in 1977, there had never been a movie like Star Wars. I know, he's your daddy. Did he teach you to talk like that? He was a sound engineer, so he would go around and he would record sounds of things. Never work on stage with kids or droids. So for example, when you hear a TIE fighter and it goes screaming past on the stage, that screaming sound, that's a bull elephant trumpeting. So he would just record sounds, and he gave R2 his voice. He would talk to George Lucas and say, I think R2 is saying, I see a stormtrooper coming, and George Lucas would say, yeah, that's about right, and then he would invent a series of beeps and boops that would sound like that. That's pretty cool. In his basement, with homemade equipment. This is the inside of Kenny Baker's R2. He sits in here. There he is in one of the first R2 suits for the first movie. And so he did all the scenes where he's doing this. You can see down here, you can see his legs kind of go at an angle into the feet. So anytime you see him standing on 2 feet in the movie, that's Kenny Baker inside in the first movie. And of course, Anthony Daniels was C-3PO. People ask us, how come you don't do C-3PO? It's because none of us are skinny enough to fit in that costume. Here he is. This is probably one of the first days of filming in front of the Jawa sound crawler. You can see his legs going through those tubes. Had to be uncomfortable.
Good.
And here he is eating a hot dog and drinking a Coke. He had the only seat you can sit in had like a built-in table there. It's pretty cool.
Fun.
And doing some work. This scene never made it in the movie because C-3PO's legs are broken. Okay, very first scene they shot for Star Wars, very first scene in the whole trilogy was in front of the Jawa sandcrawler when they were going to trade the droids. They worked great in the studio, but when they put them on the sand, they didn't work so good. So they were having a really tough time making the robots move in the sand. They brought plywood out, they laid it down, it was hot, things weren't working right, the droids were breaking. You can see a piece of plywood down there. This is John Sears trying to get the thing moving. They're trying to get R5 moving. Remember, he's got the bad motivator. Okay, so they made Star Wars. It was mildly successful. It was very successful, and they made a ton of money. So now they said we can make Empire Strikes Back, and we can build new robots and better stuff, and we have a lot of money. So they made brand new robots out of fiberglass for Kenny, and he's smiling because now he's got more room, it's lighter, it works better. And here they are filming Empire Strikes Back. Now notice they got smart enough to lay plywood down for R2 to run on before they shot the movie. Empire Strikes Back, very famous scene with Yoda. This is actually, they improvised a lot of scenes in that movie because they kind of didn't know what was going to happen. But one of the things they did was they said, hey, we want R2 to fall in the water off of the spaceship, and we want a creature to try to eat him and spit him out. And you think, okay, that's fine, but how do you shoot a droid up in the air? So they built this big pit, and they put R2 in the pit, and they blasted him out with an air cannon. And they blasted him up in the air and crashed. So that's kind of how they did it back then. This scene here, where he's up on his tiptoes, was a last-minute thing, and they said, let's get him up on his tiptoes. Well, he didn't go up on his tiptoes. So they built a board underneath him that took. You can do that now? On your tiptoes? Yeah, no, don't ask me to, okay, he doesn't want to show you. So they built a board that tilted up so they could get his feet to tilt up. And George Lucas said this was one of his very favorite scenes in all movies. Okay, so you can see here that this is Kenny Baker, because you can see the little giveaway there. Next time you watch the movie, you can check that out. Irving Kirch's office, who was directed Empire Strikes Back, this is his office. Carrie Fisher was being interviewed, but I just thought it was cute that he had this great R2 collection back here. So you know who the famous guy is, R2. And this is a little cast photo, but this is the R2 that was shot out of the air cannon. You can see he's a little beat up. Okay, Return of the Jedi. Now here, remember all of R2s were robots. So they're actually laying plywood in the sand, and then I thought this was cute, George Lucas with a shovel, so they could get the R2s to run down here. Now this scene was never in the movie. This scene is R2 coming out of Luke's cave, because Luke goes back to Tatooine and has to build a lightsaber, because remember his hand was cut off and his lightsaber was gone. So he's sitting in the cave building a lightsaber, and then he sends R2 and C-3PO off. There he is building a lightsaber, and he sends them off to Jabba's palace. So that was not actually in the movie, but they did shoot it. And here they are walking to Jabba's palace. They had problems just like we do. See his dome right here is fallen off because the ground was rough and it jittered and fell off. You might see that happen here. I can lift it off, you know. I know how. Yeah, okay. So, anyway, that's a little history of R2 in the movies. I'm going to show you about this hieroglyph. Hieroglyph is cavemen did those on the walls of their caves, right? So this little hieroglyph, anybody know where this is? Don't say, just raise your hand. A few people know. Okay, cool. George Lucas did another movie later called Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And see that little hieroglyph right there is R2-D2 and C-3PO. And so if you watch his movies, every movie you can find something. Here's another one you probably haven't seen. Get my slide to go. Notice the registration number on the plane. So now you got to go back and watch all those movies again. We have a lot of fun here at the Museum of Flight. They invite us down once in a while. We hope to be back again next year. We've got a display across on the other side underneath the space shuttle. You can go see parts. You can see taking apart robots. You can see inside of them. When we're done here, we're going to bring these guys out into the lobby so you can take pictures. I do want to introduce the operators, the daddies, the mommies of these droids. So let's see, R2, R9 down in the end is Chris. Chris, are you back there? Yeah, Chris, come on out, stand by your droid. R2, A2 is Mike. Mike's back here someplace. Oh, you were down there. Sneaky. R4, M9 is Taka. Taka back there. Taka's not very tall. He's a little taller than R3, B3. Yeah, that's Todd. Okay. R3, B2. Serena. You back there? There's Serena. Yep. Serena's not very tall either. You might have to stand in front of the droid. R4, M9 is Rob. Back there, Rob. And R2D2 is Ryan. Ryan's back there. Thank you, guys. All right. That's all I got to say. We are going to be, like I said, you bring them out, put them around the lobby, you can take pictures, you can ask questions, and don't forget to see somebody by the Space Shuttle. Thank you very much.